Greetings. This evening's Dharma talk title is based on the seventh of the 10 prohibitory precepts in the Soto Zen Buddhist lineage. Insufficient? Extinguishing? I was just corrected. Were you correcting me?
I was putting out the
yeah, okay, yeah. He was, he just doesn't want to admit it. So sometimes when we, sometimes if we have people who are allergic to incense, then we still offer incense, but then after we offer it completely, then we come in and we extinguish the incense. Once it's been offered, there's no time limit on it. The offering is what is important. The intention is what is important. You don't have to complete anything. Could give a talk on that, but I'm not going to. It's always the intention. My intention was to extinguish that. I didn't do a thorough job. So Kiyun, rather than yelling at me, pointing that out and embarrassing me, came up and put it out for me. The seventh prohibitory precept is only, there's lots of ways this is translated. Lots of ways that is sometimes translated in different ways so that it doesn't even sound like the same precept or guideline. And you observe precepts. This is not something you obey. And so how you observe this, receive this, is going to show up differently depending on the particular lake or mud puddle of confusion that your life is submerged in. Only Buddha action, only awakened, Buddha means awake, only awakened action exists. That's impossible, isn't it? How can that be true with all the chaos, all the warfare, not only in the streets, in the world, in the nations, but in our own mind stream? How can that possibly be Buddha action? So what is being said? Well, first of all, would you recite that precept slowly, please?
The seventh prohibitory precept. No praise or blame. Only Buddha action exists. To know there is no one to hurt and no one to be hurt. No one to benefit and no one to be benefited. We bow to all beings and openly acknowledge what has been done. The seventh prohibitory precept.
Isn't that outrageous? Outrageous that we could just, in the face of all the craziness in our own mind, in our neighborhood, in our world, in our families, that you could observe that precept, only Buddha action exists. No praise or blame. There's no one who to blame, there's no one to praise. And this is a precept that's actually speaking to and about the ultimate nature of everything that you can actually realize. And if you wanted to do some cause and effect, it's because somebody realized this 2,500 years ago and began to teach that. And down through the centuries, other teachers, other students of the Buddha's Dharma have understood this and began to teach. So how are we to understand this if faced with all the negativity, but faced with all the craziness and the aggression in the world? So this is, if you look at this closely and contemplate this and train your mind to see clearly, eventually you'll understand what is being pointed at by observing this precept. It doesn't mean that there isn't night and day or up and down, back and forth. It doesn't mean that the relative world isn't in our face all the time. Even when we sleep, it's occurring, some kind of polarity, some kind of success and failure and good and evil coming and going. But fundamentally, the fundamental understanding, only Buddha activity, only awakened activity. My way of saying this, as of 1977, when I realized it in my own mind stream, didn't mean I'd realized, that doesn't mean I was enlightened in 1977. My whole mind was full of rocks. But nothing sleeps. To realize that is to not only realize that, to see that, to understand that, but also to not be at war with anything, to fully acknowledge. We acknowledge what has been done. We acknowledge what is happening. This is a way we work with our mind stream in terms of the things that where we have wronged someone, ourselves or others. We don't apologize for that as if there's somebody wrong, which creates more egocentrism, sometimes called apologizing or forgiveness or all the other baloney. That being said, I'm not saying that you or anybody or maybe thousands, millions of people might need to work with relative truth in that way, forgive people. You don't have to do that. If you understand what this vow is, you don't have to forgive anyone because nobody gets credit or blame. If somebody is wrong or to blame, then they've done something and you have to forgive them, which perpetuates the cycle of someone who's done wrong, but they have apologized, and then you, out of the kindness of your heart, have forgiven them. You don't have the right to forgive anyone. There is no one. There's no solid being. And if this terrifies you enough to go back into that discursive polarity that goes this way and that way and this way and that way and this way and that way, then you might want to train your mind to see what this is. This is not a mundane path of success and failure, of right and wrong, of praise and blame. It is a transcendent path which you can realize your true nature before you die. If you were never going to die, we wouldn't even have a monastery. Why have anything? Just hang around, like I've said before. If we were here, about 300 or 400 years it might take of bashing your head on a brick wall before you realize that maybe I shouldn't go to war with anything anymore. Maybe I don't have to do that anymore. But it might take a lot of beating yourself up, beating others up, killing people that won't die, because, like I said, nobody dies. When in reality, that's with a capital R, by the way, nobody actually does die. But since we think we die, then that perpetuation of the polarity continues to go. Realize who you are. There's no guarantee. Guarantees are cheap. That's about a merchandising mentality. Nothing's for sale. Nothing is purchased. It's already the case. It's called, in the Dzogchen tradition, or in the words of Longchenpa, if I can paraphrase, everything is already perfect. There's nothing to correct. Only Buddha action exists. Because this has no otherness to it, has nothing else to it, you can't prove it, you can't deny it, and if you see it, you can't ignore it. And if you see it, you can't ignore it because you are what you're looking at. You've actually transcended the dualistic confusion that people are wrestling with that perpetuates war and peace, war and peace, war and peace, war and peace. Has to be seen. And if you see it, you might be tongue-tied because you might see what there's no words for. But if you are endeavoring to help people, if you're a Dharma teacher and you wish to help people fundamentally with their permission, if they come and ask you, then you begin to talk in such a way that will encourage them to see it themselves. This is why if you come to this monastery and live, you will be asked to do sitting meditation 6.5 hours a day, or I don't know, it's 4 or 5. Used to be every day, and now it's cut back a little bit because people are lazy, right? Lazy. No, because people have other things to do, and we are not funded by anybody. Excuse me. There's no way we can really comprehend what a statement like that, no praise or blame, what's that about? Of course, she, they, he did that, caused that terrible thing, or someone else dedicated their life and helped. People started a foundation to help homeless people, or any kind of thing you can come up with. Don't they get some praise? Yes, but that's the relative situation. What shows up, if it's grasped or rejected, no matter what you do with it, because it is dependently risen, because it is polarized, it will flip around and go the other way. It's just like an hourglass. Turn it over. When one side is full, when the bottom is full, you turn it over. So without a spiritual path where you're doing this with your consciousness, not just with your thinking process or analysis or judgmental mind, you're actually seeing it's in front of you. It's the table, it's the chair, it's the rug, it's your partner's face, your child's face, your dog's face, a bird in the tree you've never met. But you're not separate from them fundamentally. If you see this, the war is over. You don't have to stop the war. It just stops. Only Buddha action exists, has to be seen. And even that has a lot of relative words like existence, non-existence. So then we're back into that. Well, if it exists, how about does everything else doesn't exist? Or wouldn't spend too much time there. So no praise or blame. Not that we couldn't do that. And it doesn't mean that if someone comes and brings you your cigarettes, oh, wait a minute, you shouldn't be smoking. If somebody doesn't come and bring you your car keys or serve breakfast to you or bring you some tea or some coffee, that you wouldn't say thank you. That they didn't do. It's not that we're not completely doing away with that. Just like in the last line there. How does that go? The where we bow to all things. Can you recite that? The last couple.
We bow to all beings and openly acknowledge what has been done.
Yes. So we're not abandoning relative truth. We're not abandoning relative truth for some kind of polarized enlightenment or some kind of success story or some kind of universal kindness and love that overflows. It's not that you wouldn't have affection or you wouldn't have caring or you wouldn't have any emotions that would show up in that way. But to acknowledge what has been done means that you live in enlightenment. You don't live in warfare or peacefare. You don't live in the polarities. I mean, you live in enlightenment, and there isn't anything that is the opposite of enlightenment. Way before I got here, teachers who have understood this, have seen this for themselves, have even said that afflictions and awakening are not two different things. How could that possibly be? How could pain and pleasure, war and peace, good and evil, any kind of polarity you want to bring up, not be separate from each other? I don't know. I have no idea. Go ahead, Toji.
Does dependent origination express Buddha nature?
Yes. Dependent origination shows us, by understanding that teaching, which is not, this isn't a quick study. Dependent origination, that there's no separate thing anywhere, that everything is dependent on every other singularity or apparent singularity to provide us all with the illusion that there are separate things that actually have their own independence, including this body-mind complex. It's there. We're not saying it's not there. We're not saying there isn't a voice here. We're not saying there isn't an old man sitting here saying things. We're just saying it's not separate. He, she, they, this, anything is not separate from anything else. If you realize that in your mind stream, you won't make any more choices about anything. You will not find a boat with two oars. You will not find, there will be no either or. There's just this, just Buddha activity exists. And you are not separate from the Buddha. You're not the Buddha, but you're not separate from that. And you will function out of that, much to the dismay of those around you. Sometimes earlier on, was it Vivian? Vivian then asked the question on the not open heart, but as it is meditation at 6 o'clock, ask about the idea of crazy wisdom. And it shows up as crazy because our mind is wired in a dualistic idea of it should be, it shouldn't be. It's right or it's wrong. We have to correct things or fix things. Well, it can look crazy, but one who is functioning in that way, functioning out of whatever arises, not separate from it. So therefore, the way you will be functioning, if you realize your true nature, you'll have no idea what's going to happen next, and you won't mind, and you will not be threatened by anything, because there's no longer an individual that is afraid of something else. Not only is there no individual anymore, but the something else is gone also. The subjectivity and the objectivity are no longer separate things. So they may show up dependent origination. They may show up ultimately depending on everything else. So they don't go away. They're just unreal. More?
Where did that translation originate from that we have for our precepts?
I'm not sure, do you know? I'm not sure. There's lots of ways that's translated. Some have said that this is Kobin's translation. I've heard that said before. But I don't know that for sure. I just know that it can be spoken of very simply, and also can be long and drawn out the way this one is. It's more explaining what it's about. Do you know the short version of the seventh? Anyone know that?
No praise or blame.
No praise or blame. So only Buddha activity exists. How's the rest of that go? What does it mean to fully acknowledge what has been done? How does that?
Openly, yeah.
Huh?
Openly acknowledge.
Openly acknowledge. Very good. Thank you.
What is it to openly acknowledge what has been done?
To see what comes and goes with no post-it notes, nothing extra, nothing explaining anything, nothing justifying anything. Just that. just Buddha activity, just awake, always awake, living in enlightenment. Go ahead.
When you're bowing, so in terms of the war that's in our TVs, in our lives,
Yes.
in Ukraine and Russia, and the horrendous scenes that are shown there, is that openly acknowledging what has been done?
Is what openly
Those-
watching CNN?
Those pictures, the films that we see on our TVs, or any war. I could also,
Not particularly. No, it's not.
that's not
But
openly acknowledging what has been done.
It's fighting with it.
Also,
But the issue there is not so much that if you openly acknowledge what has been done, then of course, then everything's going to be okay, because now we're openly acknowledging what has been done. But it's rather to see that what is showing up that is dependently risen in terms of that war, in terms of the horrible stuff that people are going through, not only there, but in Palestine or in Syria or any other place in the world where, the streets of Chicago, places where people are mistreated, abused in the name of the state or in the name of somebody who's in charge, power. But that the causes and conditions that are behind any of that are so extensive and untraceable, and they've started a long time ago. So all of the things coming together and showing up have been going on for a long, long time. So it's rare for someone caught in the milieu that we call samsara for them, with all the seduction and all of the sales pitch, whether it's in the 13th century, whether it is in the 13th century, or whether it is in last week on YouTube, about do this, do it this way. This is the right way. This is how to do this. All kinds of commercials for everything. So not particularly opening or acknowledging what has been done. That situation needs to happen in the mind stream of an individual. It's not that couldn't happen with the whole society or with the whole Sangha. It could, but it needs to happen within each person.
you're bowing. So is there, from a practitioner's standpoint, a meditator's standpoint, what is our responsibility in bowing to all beings and openly acknowledging what has been done?
Just receive. Receive. And then by receiving, you'll know if you have a karmic, let's say it in a strong way, a karmic obligation to pack your bags and go to Ukraine and go on the rifle range there and start training people or training with people. If you need to do that, I'm not against that. I'm not here promoting anything other than train your mind. Find out who you are so you have no doubts. You don't get your identity from anything, anyone's opinion of you and who you are, where you're going. Find out. And then when you roll out of bed and you look at the world through, whether it's the television or the internet, TikTok or whatever, wherever this is coming from, that is being produced by everyone all over the place, then you will see, because you're no longer confused about your identity, you will see whether you need to just stay home or whether you need to send money to Mayun in France to help her with her children's foundation. Just simply put, to talk about somebody I know is deliberately trying to do that. Or whether you need to, I don't know, there's just so many ways that you can respond to that. And one of the ways you can respond to it is train your mind so you don't step out of your house or into your your car or onto the train or into a plane and go and take your unexamined chaos into the world. It's already full of chaos. It's very difficult. I'm sure you've noticed if you're in a room, if you have not really dealt with your own anger in such a way you understand what it is, you'll notice if somebody gets angry around you, it'll start to vibrate and you'll have anger in yourself, maybe wanting to stop them, or you might have anger because that you get upset when you're around anyone who's angry because of your own difficulty with anger. And the only way you can deal with that is to try to figure out the way you were treated when you were 5 years old. And maybe you're succeeded. Maybe you had no memories of what happened when you were 5. I'm going off in somewhat of a tangent here, but it's dependently arisen. You're not going to be able to track it down. But what can you do? What you need to do is showing up in your mind stream over and over and over. Take it to the wall. Sit down. It doesn't have to be a wall. You don't have to be a Buddhist. I think it's very difficult to do work on this without some kind of support from somebody who might know a little bit more than you do, to put it literally, and from a teaching, some kind of a teaching that goes directly towards what this is, just like this seventh precept does. It's a powerful precept. It's actually pointing at ultimate truth, but not avoiding relative truth. Powerful. All of these precepts are like this. Just like the first one of no taking life, not to interrupt the mandala of the present moment as no taking life precept. Not to interrupt the mandala. But you can't help but interrupt the mandala. If you're going to eat, you're going to have to take the life of something. So we're caught on that right-wrong situation just by being a living being, part of this situation. It's done with awareness. It's not done with the thinking process of right and wrong. It's very easy for us, any of us, to sit back that came into this world with a kind of karma that didn't cause extreme anxiety, extreme suffering, where we're suffering so much we just want to run headlong into someone else and take them apart. Maybe we had pretty good situation being raised. Maybe 100 years ago, this is what was happening. It's not separate, not separate. It's not separate. Separated all over the place. But fundamentally, it's not two different things, not three different things. The otherness is seen through. You actually, at the same time, you shake hands, you hug people, you thank people for going to the grocery store for you, and you relate in a very relative way. At the same time, your mind never leaves enlightenment. And it's not a maintenance. And you can't make yourself do it. You can't talk yourself into it. You can't think your way into it. Those who understand it might use the thought process or thinking or concepts to help explain that to you. The Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the 12 links on the chain of existence. And then the other one, we study the 30 verses of Vasubandhu, which says every time you read it, every verse is telling you conceptually how this whole setup works. It's pointing to something that is not conceptual. Further questions?
Jessica Belling,
Jessica?
what is repentance in this context?
Just to acknowledge it rather than be ashamed particularly. If shame is coming up in your mind relative to anything, or pride, which is the other pole, those two get stretched apart, and sometimes ego is maintained through shame, or ego is maintained through pride. Someone who's really kind of above the fray because of their superior intelligence, or they're they're able to understand things better than everyone else. That person might actually talk to themselves that way. Or maybe it goes the other way and they go into some kind of just terrible feeling that they can't get anything right, that they've harmed others. And it's not that relatively they haven't, but there's no solid person there. This doesn't mean we ignore the whole thing and open all the jails and let all the people out because nobody's to blame for anything. No, we deal with that as it is. And that is to protect other people from the people who are so confused about this that they will take it out on others, not realizing that those others are have been their mothers, that we're deeply related to everyone. Fundamentally, not even different people. We're the same. We're all Buddha, all awake. So openly acknowledging what has been done. But this doesn't mean we're ashamed. And the repentance is about just acknowledging it. It isn't about apologizing, although sometimes even in the Buddha's Dharma, especially in countries that have a lot of shame going on, like culturally Japan does, more about that dynamic. So it might function a little bit differently with the Japanese monks, or that whole tradition. Although I don't see it showing up in Dogen particularly, a little bit more.
Just bowing. Is it still painful to acknowledge without blame or praise, bowing?
Paraphrase your question. Say it in other words.
Jessica bowing without praise and blame, does acknowledging what's been done, I'm thinking about the situation in Ukraine or war or something like that. Does it still come with suffering and pain?
Yeah. So we can always return, and this is not nihilism, it's not negativity, it's just the truth. The very first words, as far as we know, I was not there. There's nobody alive that was there, but it was the first words out of the Buddha's mouth after his realization was, life is suffering. The Four Noble Truths, life is suffering or discontent. And life is, we have nerve endings, and even though sometimes they are soothed and even tickled, a lot of the time they're just abraded and tortured by being alive. And the cause of that, as he described it, is we want something else. We don't want what's happening. We want, needs to be slightly different. We're never really, as they say, satisfied. And if you were to take that and say, well, does that mean that someone who is awake is satisfied? No, that's not even an issue, because there is no polarity there anymore. So whatever happens is Buddha nature. This doesn't mean that the person who is awake is somehow validating somebody's mistreatment of someone else. It might be more like that person would not allow that mistreatment to happen if they were anywhere near it. And they wouldn't need permission from someone to stop it. And that's not interfering with dependent origination. That is dependent origination. But the ego mind will say, oh no, I shouldn't step in there. But one who is awake knows when to step in. And how do they know? Because they do it. They don't sit back and say, well, maybe I shouldn't say that. Maybe I shouldn't say that because that might, no, you would say it, or you would, but it's not impulsive so much, and it's not protecting something particularly. It is, the only word I can think of that might come close to it is just spontaneous. It just generates out of the atmosphere that is showing up in. More?
Just bowing. It's actually a slightly different area, but what does awake actually mean, bowing?
Well, the relative awake is like, this is sleep. And this is awake. Relative. Silly, but it's a polarized situation where the actual awake is nothing ever sleeps. The eyes close. The whole sensorium begins to close down as far as receiving, but what is fundamentally true is not sleep. And that is available. That's not, you're not separate from it. You're already from this perspective that is tied into this voice pattern that you're listening to, is already looking at the Buddha, always. Even some of these horrible people on the world scene are not separate from awake. It's just that fear has caused them to go in, and you can't pull them back out of the fear because it's a relative construct. And that if you try to do it in a relative way, you get caught in that loop that is tied in with this particular organism called a human body, which shows up in the human realm, along with the other 5 realms in the 6th realm construct that shows us how the mind is working to get things, push away things, be greedy, even be generous. Get caught in that loop, and then we think we are a living being. We think we are this body, and who you are is not. There is this body situation that consciousness is showing up in, but you are not, there's no identity happening here other than the one that's imputed or gathered or grasped through fear or through greed, through need. We need something, so we try to take something for ourselves. Yeah.
Just fine. What's the relationship between awake and consciousness?
Consciousness is just, it doesn't have any particular dynamic. So the practice is to be aware, which is something is arising in consciousness, and we're aware of the table, the computer screen, aware of people sitting in the room. So there's awareness there, but there's no person who's aware. Awareness is just occurs. Doesn't belong to anyone. The ownership is not there. The boundaries are, as it says in the Heart Sutra, the walls of the mind, without walls of the mind. The mind is may be embodied as a human form, it may not. It may be sound asleep, it may be dreaming. So consciousness is a big word. So in the Yogacara tradition, it's the whole situation is called consciousness only. Sometimes in the Zen tradition called mind only. Everything's just mind. And that doesn't hold up very good to inspection because we say, well, it can't be mind. It's just a part of a tree. It can be mind, but that you have to look at your idea of what you mean by mind. And that causes us to fasten onto our materialistic understanding of what this situation is. I'm here in 3-dimensional space, and gravity is holding me down. All these things we just take for granted. We don't realize that if one of those went away, it would be quite an exceptional experience. Like suddenly, no more gravity. So we get used to certain things. It's almost like we enter the culture of being a human being, and then as we, just like if we watch Rumi, our tiniest monk here, or monkey, I should say, we watch how he slowly is learning how to be a person. You noticed, and you notice that he's really interested in controlling everyone. He will tell his mother and father what to do next. I think he's even said to either one of them, said, leave the room now. Hasn't he said it, something like that? Like, go away, right? Yeah. Unusual for a 3-year-old to do that. So it's interesting to see how he's learning or looking around and seeing how to function. And that a lot of that is coming out of fear. Yes, Mom.
How can we openly acknowledge what has been done while working with the idea of victim and perpetrator?
Don't take your eyes off from victim and perpetrator, but don't necessarily join it with some kind of idea about what to do with it. You may find yourself doing something very definitely. With being a therapist, you're going to be working sometimes with one and maybe with both. This is what happens in restorative justice programs, which is a fairly sane way of working with intense confusion and warfare in the mind streams of people who come together and break the law. Instead of torturing people further, we go in and we look at it with the help of a therapist and try to understand what are the causes and conditions dependent origination, we're going to go back and take a look and see how could we fundamentally help everyone in this situation instead of going and buying into the victim. The perpetrator has to be punished, and the victim. The other way of doing that, and say, or the victim has to be accused of creating that situation themselves. This is another way of mistreating everybody. So it takes, I feel, it takes a strong understanding of the nature of this in order to do this effectively in a relative way, in a relative world. So train your mind so that you don't take your unexamined fear into a situation and try to fix something else based on your projection of your unexamined fear onto them. Do you follow that a little bit? Because if you do that, it's not that you might end up kind of working on yourself through someone else's neurosis or confusion. Be clear. Be responsible for your emotions and feelings. Stop trying to get rid of everything. Stop trying to fix yourself and be a better person. Yeah.
Sense you going. What can we do when we're in a position like that and we're not yet clear?
Just less is better, but that doesn't mean don't meet with them. Less is better. That doesn't mean don't suggest something to them. Less is better, but that doesn't mean interact with them and find out what can I do to help you. And quite often I say, I don't know what I'm going to do. You're the therapist. Ever had anybody say that to you? Yeah, something like that. I don't know what to do. You do it. You tell me what to do. And then what do? You work with that. Work with whatever energy comes your way, because you've been in your situation. Now, I'm not saying a person couldn't be a therapist and be a wonderful therapist with no mind training, but it's less likely. They might have their intelligence, their acumen, their understanding of relationship dynamics might be just naturally stronger than others, might be really good at that. And the particular karma that they come into this life with might be more tied into people in a way that generates a lot of, I don't know, it's like some therapists are just like snake charmers. That's all I'm going to get is a smile out of you. Some people have a lot of charisma. You have a lot of charisma. As I've told you before, all you have to do is sit in front of somebody. Your consciousness just overflows with concern and caring for others. And all of a sudden, it's not a compliment. That's why people want to come and see you, because you're not trying to repair anybody or fix anybody. You respect people's lives, don't you? Mm-hmm. Further question? Further question?
Yuhong Baoing,
Young.
when you talk about identity, you often say that we're not the body. So when you say that we're not the body, my mind goes to, oh,
It goes to O?
no, my mind goes to the other direction. I'm not the body. No, sorry. Let me start over.
Okay. I'll start over with you.
Yuhong
We'll do it
Baoing.
together. Yes.
Yeah, so when you talk about the identity, you often say that we're not the body. When I hear the sentence, I make the conclusion, I'm not the body. Is it a type of ignorance, Fabi?
I don't think so. Although if you continue to operate in that way, that won't last. It'll change. It could deepen your understanding of what this teaching is about, of not being, it's the idea of being fixed on the body as some kind of a structure that you are. So it's when Dogen said in the 13th century, drop off body and mind, he didn't mean stop identifying or stop having a hand or kind of imagining that your body was some kind of an apparition, but it's the attachment to this as being somebody going somewhere. It's the attachment and the protection that is happening there, and the fear that something can go wrong or that someone can be harmed. And the thought patterns, very similarly, he's saying drop off body and mind. He's not saying get rid of the mind and stop thinking, just saying the attachment to the thoughts. My way of saying it would be don't believe your thoughts. I'm not the first one to say that. I'm saying that, and one of the ways you do that is notice the way you'll have thoughts, and you'll notice that they seem convincing. And that's an illusion. There's no way. All thoughts are makeshift and are partial truths and are you want to say it directly, are lies in a sense, because they do not, they're fabrications, they're structures about something. They're not the actual thing. You can't actually think a piece of furniture. It's not that you can't have a piece of furniture, but you can't just think it and manifest it that way. You have to make it or buy it from, what is it, Wayfair?
玉红Baoying. So I'm confused by conclusion. Is that a situational, like the awareness, or how? What do you mean that don't conclude? Baoying.
But what I'm referring to there is the conclusion is seeing something as shows up a certain way, and rather than continue to look at that and receive that, which is what you're doing when you're practicing shikantaza. Sit down, watch the movement of the mind come towards you and fade away and come back and show up with gaps, show up with particular, whatever word structures or ideas, emotions might come and go. But to abandon what shows up for what it's about is to conclude. And as soon as you conclude anything, the consciousness, insofar as being an open frontier, closes down. It's called walls of the mind. It just feels safer to have opinions and ideas and just believe stuff. It's safer because then then you operate out of concepts that are function as walls of the mind or bars. And you don't have to do that. You can live in an open dimension where you don't know anything, but you don't miss anything. And you also don't jump to a conclusion about anything that's rising in the mind stream or in your life stream or in your living room or on the news. Please don't stop, keep coming. So I'll return back. You have to realize it. It might sound okay, might sound good, might sound inspiring to read this text. It's very inspiring for me to hear Unyo recite this. I've recited it a few times. Contemplate parts of it. Only Buddha nature, only Buddha action, only Buddha, only enlightenment. There isn't anything else. This is not some kind of simplistic idea of blocking the whole world out in the confusion and some kind of idealistic utopian mentality that we're just going to live in some kind of storybook or some kind of a Pollyanna idea that everything's okay. We just won't look. No, you're going to look right at the blood and guts. You're going to look right at the dead bodies on the streets of cities in Ukraine. But as far as certain people are responsible completely, that there's just evil, that's a misunderstanding. I'm not saying it doesn't appear that way, but to go in and just get a chokehold on that so you don't have to look any deeper into it, because what is happening there is happening in our mind streams. It's a different version of it, but it's a similar kind of war and peace going on there. And what's happening there has been going on for centuries and centuries, as far as cause and effect, just the cause and effect of what's happened in Ukraine and what's happened in Russia and down through just in the 20th century. It's just a lot of chaos happening with societies and ideas about how society should be run. A lot of confusion. But the confusion that we need to look at and understand is out in the world is extremely complex. Not that you can't get into it somewhat and write a book about it or have a position on it. But the best place, the primary place to look at that is here. Sit down, face the wall, not just here intellectually, not sit back with a cup of coffee and a legal pad and scratch down ideas about the nature of your mind and what's going on in your mind stream, or analyzing your horoscope or your Enneagram. Not that those aren't very fascinating, they are, but they will not help you to see directly. Might help you with some, but not help you to directly see your true nature. What will help you is to look at the false nature without fixing it. It's not easy to do, because when we see the confusion in the mind, we want to do one of three things. We want to stop it, chop it up, get rid of it, aggression, or we want to explain it or blame our parents for it or blame ourselves or ridicule ourselves for not being able to control our thoughts or control our mind or our emotions. So there's the aggression part, and those are lots of elaborations that you can go there. And then the third one is to just ignore it. Just look away from it. The Buddha didn't ignore anything. The Buddha's awakening was to receive everything, all the confusion, all the suffering in the world. He stopped separating himself from everything. Do I know that? Is it some kind of a fact that I checked up on somewhere in Wikipedia? No. It's just that is awakening. There's no separation between anything anymore. That's why I say to you, you don't have to be somebody else. You get to actually, the very raw material of awakening is in your mind stream. Don't agree with it. Don't object to it. Don't ignore it.
Keep bowing. How does the confusion of the world show us the confusion of our mind? Bowing.
Well, you watch the news, don't you? How much?
Half an hour.
Only a half hour a day? Really? That's probably enough. Yeah, these days it's probably enough. What do you do with that when it happens? You see what happens. What happens in your mind? You're here, you turn on the news, and you receive that. What happens? Tell me.
I want to pick a side.
So that's showing you something. You see that you're looking for right and wrong. And it's not that there isn't something that won't fill the bill of out and out evil, if you want to go there. Out and out wonderful, good, kindness, loving, everything, if you want to go there. So how's it showing you your mind?
It looks like the warfare.
Yeah. I can help you with that, but you may need to contemplate this a little bit. It is your mind. You're always looking at your mind. If you think you're looking at some kind of three-dimensional somewhere, that too. But the fundamental situation is you're looking at your mind. It's always a mirror. There are teachings that go back that use the realization of what this is as a mirror. the teaching person is here to help you with that, if you are a student. If you're not, then you may have to be a student of CNN. I don't know.
Human bowing. So if I see images of dead people and laying in the street, do I need to bring that to the cushion bowing?
Not necessarily. No, don't necessarily bring anything to the cushion unless it follows you there. And if it does, then look at it. Whatever's arising is appropriate. Once you sit down, take your seat, sit in a symmetrical posture with an attitude of just receiving whatever is continuing to move after you've returned to stillness. And that's your object of meditation. It may be pictures of those people. I know the one that haunts me is seeing a woman's hand in the dirt, whose fingernails were quite beautifully painted, but the rest was all very bruised. It brought both of those images of someone that a few days ago might have been having her nails done somewhere in the town she was in. And now she's dead because she was shot. It's pretty intense. So don't abandon that for what it means. Just look at that. That's your mind.
Human bowing. What do we do with the pain that comes up around that?
Receive it. Receive it. Just receive. Just feel that. Not separate from anything, anywhere. But we tend to seal ourselves off from everything and have limited pain, and which is called pain and pleasure, pain and pleasure, pain and pleasure. Or pain, no pain, pain, no pain. Neutral, and then there's pain. Neutral, and then there's pain.
Human bowing.
You got a lot of bowing to do.
Would it be the same with numbness? If you are experiencing some kind, you feel numb to what you're seeing?
Well, the awareness that you're getting numb is still awareness. So rather than call it a state of numbness, the numbness that is actually blocking or hindering your understanding, you won't know that you're numb. That's the very nature of numb or ignorance. You don't know it. You've shut it off. It's succeeded for a while. But to know that you're getting numb to something, there's still a quality of awareness around seeing that there's some kind of a knee-jerk reaction, perhaps, of wanting to just shut down and just not look at this. One of them is just can't watch the news kind of thing. Is there a final question? Is there a final question out there in Zoom? Especially someone who hasn't asked a question. There's only 38 people there, so it might be hard for you to come up with a question.
Combining, you say we all have Buddha nature. Can Buddha nature be expressed in different ways?
Yes. Yes.
And sometimes I just feel like I admire people and people can embody the bodhicitta quality, and somehow that causes a fear for me. So how can I see that deeply?
So bodhicitta, there's two kinds of bodhicitta. Bodhi is awakening, and chitta is mind, so awakened mind. And the way this is taught for centuries, taught by Atisha's and his 7 points of mind training, and also by Shantideva and others, is that it's the mind of awakening that is relative, is endeavoring to fundamentally help people in a relative way, put others before oneself, even deliberately trying to do that. Sometimes this is a practice that I don't teach because I have reasons for not teaching that I could go into it another time, but it's called Tonglen, or the practice of exchanging oneself for others by using the breath. I don't teach that because it's too mechanical. That mechanical kind of thing allows aspects of consciousness to come in that might be better not not to invite. So that's why I do that. But that doesn't mean you can't have a gesture of wanting to include others, like we do here when we do a Maitri Bhavana. It isn't about results. The spiritual path is about intention. If it's about results, we're right back to being held responsible for this or that, or having some kind of a guarantee that meditation practice will work. The very path to awakening feels like failure because it's not a mundane path. There's a path of transcendence, of transcending this very world of greed and accomplishment and notoriety and praise and blame, transcending that. So relative bodhicitta is just doing the best you can, and there are practices for that. One of them is we do at the end of every, we say chants, we dedicate the merit to others. Any merit that comes through this practice that we do, we're going to give it away to everyone. So it's the gesture of doing that, not to see, did everybody get it? Is this working? Is compassion really going to work? So it's not a relative thing. It's something you give away. And so I feel like knowing you, I don't know you really well, but I think you're doing fine with that. You have a lot of sincerity, and your intention is to help others, starting with your family and with anyone you meet. So I don't see you any other way than that. So I would not be too concerned with that. What I would be concerned with, if you want my feedback, is train your mind a lot. You get a lot of sitting meditation in. A lot. Sit down, hold still, watch, look at the ball. And then ultimate bodhicitta is to see that everything is already what it needs to be. And ultimate bodhicitta is what is being addressed in this seventh prohibitory precept. Say prohibitory or grave precept. It just means it challenges you a little bit. When you want to recite that again? Ultimate bodhicitta.
The seventh prohibitory precept, no praise or blame. Only Buddha action exists. To know there is no one to hurt and no one to be hurt. No one to benefit and no one to be benefited. We bow to all beings and openly acknowledge what has been done.
I think we can end right there.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Ji-ho san shi fu shi son bu sa mo ko sa mo ko mo ja ho mi. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita.
O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.
Hello. So Kelly, how are you feeling? You feeling better? Any better?
Yeah, we're feeling better. Dan kind of has it right now, but we're gonna try to see if maybe we're over it by Sunday so we can come, but not sure yet.
Yeah. Do you know what it is for sure?
Pretty sure it's just a cold. We took COVID tests a couple times just to make sure, but we think just cold with like the season change and sinuses and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I hope you recover and the dogs are all good?
Yes, they're great. They love that it's getting a little warmer and not so snowy out. They like the snow, but they like being outside more.
And how about the cats? How are they doing?
Great. Got our old lady Lucy here.
Yeah, she's the one that hides when people come over. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't blame her. I don't blame her for hiding.